Huh?
Hi.
Hi, Chloe.
Hi, Talia.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Everyone else.
Welcome back to Tits and Tea.
To Tits and the Tea. I'm Talia.
I'm Chloe.
Yeah.
And this is episode 2.
Yes, of the thing. Today we're going to talk about things that we wish that we had learned in sex ed growing up. I feel like everyone's, at least if you went to public school or sex education, is probably extremely similar, where you get like the drawings of the penis and you don't even really see what the vulva looks like. You just see like the uterus and like the vaginal canal and then like the ovaries, and it's all like these really nice drawings of them.
Yeah. Okay, so full disclosure before we get into this episode.
Oh.
I had a very unusual sex ed experience in grade school.
Oh, nice.
I believe, and I don't exactly know how this happened.
Grade school, like elementary school?
Yeah, like all the way through high school. So, something about my year in particular, I think, hit right when there was reworking of the sex ed system in Austin ISD or in Texas. And as such, I ended up having like an absurd amount of sex ed classes in grade school. So I had it starting in 6th grade. Whether that was driven by state curriculums or by the fact that I had 2 very liberal female teachers who made it happen with the school. I'm not sure, but we had sex ed in 6th grade.
Okay.
Then I had it again in junior high. And then again in high school.
Did you have it 7th, 8th?
I had it in, I believe it was 7th grade.
Okay, because I know that like in my school, we had like a little chat where they separated the boys and girls, I think.
Yeah, they did that in 6th grade for us, yeah.
And that was just because, I don't even know if I'm remembering this right. I remember like having like a very vague talk, but just about menstruation.
Yeah.
And I think it was because like there was one girl in my grade in particular who got her period earlier than everybody else and was already like a full C to a small D in 5th grade. She was already developed, and I know that it was something that obviously all the kids talked about, and I overheard some of like the parents discussing it. Shame on you. And so I think eventually like the school was like, okay, we need to step in and say something about it.
So we had that,
and
a similar sort of thing in 6th grade. It probably was 8th grade in junior high, and then again in, I think actually it was 7th and 8th grade, because I remember 2 different teachers in junior high going over it with me, because 6th grade was at my elementary school, which was also unusual. And then in high school, it was supposed to be 9th grade, and then I think they changed it to 10th grade, so I got it twice in high school as well.
So in my school,
which is just ridiculous.
You could opt out of sex ed due to religious beliefs.
Yeah.
I know I had a couple of kids in my class that didn't have to do sex ed because of that. Was there a lot of kids in your class that opted out, or do you feel like most?
There were a few kids who were given the option. Most didn't. I also know a few of my classmates, their parents didn't really see the point of them getting sex ed and like didn't want them to do it, which is laughable. But they were like, no, screw that. I need to understand what the hell's going on with my body. And so they asked if they could stay. And like the teachers.
That's really brave, actually.
Yeah.
That's really brave.
Sort of had their hands tied in the sense that like they had to have a permission slip for certain aspects of the education part.
So when they show a picture of the vulva, like step outside, and then they
like they were able to learn about all of like the reproductive health in terms of like menstruation, etc.
Okay.
But when it came to like actual talk about like sex and safe sex practices and things like that, then they couldn't technically be allowed in the classroom because their parents had denied permission.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't think we were.
Though all of us kids definitely did not care and shared what we learned, because kids will be kids and will do that.
You know what? If you guys didn't tell them, there's always the fucking internet. Mm-hmm. So there's that. I don't really feel like I don't think that we really went into a lot of what sex actually was in my class. And the one that I remember the most was, I had a teacher in 8th grade. She was my science teacher. Her name was Miss Chase. I was just having thought in my head, being like, is it safe to say where I went to like junior high? But then I'm like, in today's day and age, if you really want to know, you can find out. Yeah. So she worked at Petaluma Junior High here in California. I don't know if she still works, but I will never, ever forget this. I remember she like filled up a condom with as much water as she could, and it got gigantic. And she looked at the class and she was like, I want you all to remember this. If a man ever says that like he's too big for a condom, he's fucking lying to you. And that, I don't think that's an experience a lot of people get in sex ed.
No.
And I really appreciated it. So I know she's never going to see this, but like, I just want to send out into the interweb ether how much I am grateful, and that I still think about her to this day. She was also just an awesome teacher.
We all remember the awesome teachers.
Yeah. And
like, it wasn't... like my 2 6th grade teachers, Miss Austin and Miss Lynn, they took it upon themselves to create an anonymous jar for questions.
Oh, we had an anonymous jar, but nobody fucking took it seriously. And there was things like, my friend actually put this in, and I know she put this in because she told me that she put this in. She put this question in. This was the 8th grade class. Mm-hmm. She put in, if you're a hermaphrodite, can you fuck yourself and get yourself pregnant? And she used those exact words. And Miss Chase literally picked it up, she read it, edited it slightly, and then she like crumpled it up and was like, no. Yeah, just ridiculousness. But then when we took sex ed again my freshman year, I feel like I learned even less than I did in my 8th grade class.
Same.
And
high school was way less educational in terms of sex ed, which is stupid.
And I feel like a lot of it was, looking back, fear-mongering. Like, I don't feel like any of us had any clarity going into that class or coming out of that class. And it's really unfortunate considering, and like the teacher who had it was really sweet, but she taught like so did Miss Chase. But she taught other classes, and I just don't think that it was really a priority.
Yeah.
And it's a shame considering that when you're in like obviously people sometimes have sexual intercourse before that time. I think that most kids start sexually exploring with each other in high school.
Yeah.
And that would have definitely prevented a few pregnancies that happened.
Yeah.
Just basic stuff like that. So I guess how dare you have bodily functions? Throw yourself into a river, you harlot. But I think today what we want to talk about is things that we wish that we had been told. A lot of them do focus around the female experience, also because we both were assigned female at birth.
Exactly.
And we have those reproductive organs, so it's definitely more geared towards our experience. If there's anybody out there who wants to hear more about, I'd actually be really curious. If there's any guys watching this, if you could DM us on Instagram or leave a comment on this YouTube channel, either with things that you wish that you had learned with like an answer, or you can just put down questions, and then maybe in like a week or two we could come back and maybe do
we definitely
like
have plans for Q&A episodes anyways, or we'll do short videos for like TikTok or Instagram Reels that we can answer those questions, and depending on how complicated the answer is. But we don't want you to feel left out. You're important too.
You're half the equation.
Yeah. So some of the things that I think we've both come up with are
Mhm.
definitely things that I also know just, like some of my friends had questions about,
Mhm.
because also, depending on what teacher you got, the results were
Different.
wildly different
Oh, yeah.
in terms of what information you got and how
Mhm.
helpful it actually was.
Yeah. And a lot of it, I feel like we've gone through.
Because I think the fan's getting loud.
Yeah, sorry, Bobo. We're gonna
Sorry.
disturb you. Just
Sorry,
stretch.
kitty
It'll be
boy.
okay.
There we go.
Fudge muffin. What was I gonna say? Oh,
Varied experiences of the educational
Various-
experience because of the teachers that we have.
no, it's
No.
gone. It might come back later, like in the 5th hour.
It almost certainly will.
Yeah.
So
I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, Chloe!
Without further rambling and ado, which, we are prone to, that is part of our charm.
Not us.
Get two neurospicy chicas together, and what do you get?
You get a lot of random shit and awkward segues.
Yeah. But without any more of that, let's get into some of the things that
Let's
we
get
really
into
wish
the thing.
we had learned.
I'm going to be looking down a little bit just because we have the notes on my phone. We kind of did this thing where I was like, homework, pick 10 things you wish you had learned.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them overlapped to the point where, I ended up not even using my list. It's just yours. Yeah. And then Chloe had the free time today to do some, fact checking and stuff just because we want to be as accurate as we can. Obviously, we're not
there's
experts.
a lot of it that we know already.
Yeah.
But, there's also evolving understandings.
That's what I was going to say, Chloe, you beautiful fucking bitch. I was going to say that there's a lot of things that I feel like we were probably taught in school that now, because I feel like we've kind of gone through a second sexual revolution, that we have new information about now. And there's certain things that we realize, when we were being taught that, for me it was the early 2000s. For you it was the 90s?
Late 90s, early 2000s.
Late 90s, early 2000s?
When I say early 2000s, though, I do mean
one.
The aughts.
Oh, I know. I know. But I feel like there's so many
2000 to 2004.
I feel like there's so many different things that we ended up, when we looked into it, being these have been taught for over a century, and a lot of the studies were happening in the Victorian era. I'm talking 1850s to maybe 1890s, and people were just we figured it out. That's it. And then they shoved it to the back of the closet. And then now we've come back around and been why are we using this outdated data? And so we've had some more illuminations on things.
That said, there's still a lot of data that hasn't been updated.
No.
But that is for later episodes.
Yeah.
We're going to get more into the history and politics of things. So we figured a good place to start with, for number one is...
you put down the real and helpful truths about periods.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, obviously most sex ed is going to go into at least the basics of
the reproductive system. And
here's your reproductive system.
Yeah.
If you're born a girl, you're probably going to get your period. There are, of course, exceptions to this for a variety of reasons, which it would take a very long time to properly go into.
Yeah.
But we can also always link resources for those sorts of things.
And we can always circle back.
But what it sounds like happened with your friend, periods can start as young as age 9.
As 9. Mm-hmm.
It is not only teenagers who get their periods. And realistically, as much stigma and as much shame as there is around menstruation and periods for girls all around the world, the absurdity of that lies in the fact that I believe I have the statistics in here somewhere. Yeah, half of all of the female population is of reproductive age, which means about 26% of the world's population is of an age that they have their period.
It's from 9 until you hit menopause, which a lot of people think happen in your 60s, which it can, but there's also varying ages for that. It's all a spectrum, and you can get your period much later in life as well. I know a few people who didn't get their periods until their mid-teens to late teens. And a lot of them
factors
were
with that.
athletes or dancers where they had a very low body fat percentage. Mm-hmm. And so that led to them getting it after they stopped the sport or the dance form that they were practicing.
On average, just as another framework for how normal this is, the average female, or assigned female at birth person, has about 450 periods in their lifetime.
Yeah, I think I was watching a TikTok the other day that said it was like, this is another reason why I should fact check myself, because I always have these like facts, and then I really quickly go on my phone being like, I don't remember. I think it's like we spend like if you were to put them all together, like 4 to 6 years bleeding.
Up to 7 years of your life.
Up to 7 years of our lives just bleeding out.
Yep, monthly periods can equate to about 7 years of your life.
That just makes...
Depending on how long your reproductive age range is, whether you start really young and end much older.
I don't know, it makes me remember this one line from Bon Appetit, where she's all like, yeah, you gotta get yourself a pussy like a woman, and it's about like she opened a jar or something.
It was so strong.
It was so tough.
Look at how tough I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of more statistics around periods and like averages and information, that is helpful because it helps to destigmatize them.
Yeah.
Average cycle length, which is not something that is known by a lot of people, surprisingly, is 28 days. Your actual period can be anywhere from 2 to 7 of those days. Mm-hmm. Now, there is variation within that as well if you have hormone imbalances, which I personally have a lot of experience with.
Or if you're me and you get really stressed, and then you can get your period, have like 2 days off, and then go into a second fucking period, which has only happened twice in my life, and one was due to college finals.
Yes. I've also a few times had various prolonged periods of menstruation, the longest being about 2.5, almost 3 months. Yeah. There were small breaks in there, but never more than like 3 days off. It was never a full cycle. Mm-hmm. Have the doctors figured out the cause of that yet? No, that is...
Of course not.
One of the areas about female reproductive health that needs a lot better attention, and it is a big part of why female reproductive health is so important and why we have to work so hard to protect it. Because, and this is one of the facts that I brought in there that is not talked about.
Open this up.
But
that.
One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is why we're spending so much time talking about menstruation is that your reproductive health, your menstruation cycle, and being able to track all of that and all of the hormones that are related to it affects so much more than just your ability or inability to have kids. Yeah. And it affects so much more than just, whether you bleed every month, how much you bleed every month, how much pain you have, do you have symptoms like breast tenderness, etc. It sure affects all of those things, but, and this is something I just recently learned, apparently for asthmatic women, as many as 40% of asthmatic women experience premenstrual asthma. So your asthma actually gets worse in the week leading up to your period because your hormones changing to prepare you for your period causes a higher level of sensitivity to allergens, as well as reduces your overall lung capacity somewhat.
Oh, interesting.
Largely because of how much your uterus can swell. I believe our uterus swells like 3 times. Mm-hmm.
It gets big.
Right before our period.
It can fit a baby in there. So, I mean, like, obviously your uterus can swell. There's as many different types of periods as there are people. It's like kinks and sexuality in general. Like, there is no one size fits all. Yeah. Which is something I really wish that they had talked about more in class, because if it's like, if you get a really short period, like as I got older, I started getting more of like 4-day periods. Mm-hmm. Your period blood can be different colors. Sometimes there's clots in them. the amount of embarrassing conversations I had to have with like my mom and my OBGYN when I was a teen because I was convinced that I was dying.
Because they just didn't give you any information.
And that's also just like
yeah.
me, because I'm an anxious person and like I'm always convinced that I'm dying. Chloe can attest to this. Hypochondriac, maybe. But yeah, it was really confusing, and it was, and maybe it was due to the faith that I was raised in. But my mom was always really, really open with me. Like when my mom got pregnant and I was 3, or probably like 2.5 actually, and I vividly remember this. It's strange I have memories from that young, but I do. My mom bought like this medical book showing me the process of like everything from implantation to the little fetus growing to the actual birthing process itself.
So no baby stork myths in your house?
No baby stork myths, not at all. Not even for a frickin' second. Although I did always latch on and love telling other kids the line from the Addams Family, being like, the mommy kissed daddy and the angel told the stork, and then the stork came down from heaven and put a diamond in the cabbage patch, and the diamond turned into a baby. And then it's like Pugsley being like, our parents are having a baby too, and Wednesday just being like, they had sex. And it was like, I think I actually had a daycare teacher. I didn't get in trouble. I don't think they ever told my parents, but she had a one-on-one conversation with me because I had used the word sex. And I think I was 10, maybe. And for me, it's so interesting because like my parents were super open about it, but then it was me sitting in like catechism classes and kind of seeing everybody else's reaction to the subject matter and putting that shame on myself of being like, nobody else is willing to talk about it. I had already kind of gotten myself into some trouble with the other kids for bringing up sexual matters at a young age. That followed me for the rest of my life. So I got to this point where I was like, okay, sex all around is bad, and I'm just not going to talk about it. And I became, maybe it's my scorpionic tendencies, but I became like obsessed with it. Like I would read as much as I could online, but I would only do it when my mom was out of the house. And then like I would also I'd watch porn when she was out of the house, and then I would, Mom, I know you're gonna watch this episode, so if you ever wondered about this moment, if you even remember, this is for you. My mom came home once and she like, I had learned how to delete history and cookies and whatnot because I was terrified that like she was gonna find out.
Private browser windows yet?
Yeah, and this was after my mom had a conversation with me saying that she was concerned that I would be watching porn and like wanted to just talk to me about how it's not real sex.
That's
and
good.
Yeah, my mom is the fucking best. She really is.
You.
We love you, Mommy. But she came home and she was like trying to find something on the computer because back then we had one computer. And we all took turns on it, and she came home and she was like, Did you delete the history? And my little future to be Academy Award winning actress but was like, what is computer history, Mommy? And knowing how bad I am at computers, she was just like, this must have been a fluke. Or maybe she knew I was lying and she just didn't want to push the issue. I don't know. So when I call you next, Mom, and after you see this, we can talk about that.
You guys can figure that one out. So, yeah, I think we both got lucky in having
awesome
parents who are amazing, and who we could talk to about a lot of things. I think there were maybe a few more things that my mom was a little squeamish to talk to me about than my dad. But as my mom likes to put it, the Carreras can talk about anything. I love and that. At any time. Like, there's no out of bounds subjects during meals or anything. Like, nah, it's all fair game. If it's family, you can talk about it all.
Having an open conversation about queefing at breakfast.
You know, like
never
it's
happened,
never.
But I really wish it did. That's hand. That's
but like, you know, it meant that as such, like, if I had questions, like, about things, or if I had concerns, I could always, you know, talk to my dad about pretty much anything. And then, you know, there were a few things that I definitely preferred to go to my mom for, but it was pretty open either way. Talking about the shame, though, does bring me to another one of our facts and important things that we wish had been discussed more, which is that the particular issue with shame and with the stigma, especially around reproductive health, is that it contributes to a complete lack of proper reproductive hygiene for many girls around the world. Now, there are parts of the world where this is in part due to the fact that the shame means that they are never given proper access to sanitary products the way they need. Sometimes the issues of hygiene also have to do with lack of resources, such as indoor plumbing and, like,
sometimes
facilities.
You don't, because you literally can't.
But
a big portion of it,
a lot of it,
the stigma.
And for the majority of the, like, for a lot of the world, it's the shame of it and feeling like you have to hide it, and then, like, you know, doing things like you don't speak up when you have to go to the restroom to change your sanitary products, and, you know, keeping them in longer than you should because you're running low or something, and you don't want to risk, like, having to ask someone to help you buy them because there's so much shame and awkwardness around that. And you can literally cause reproductive infections. And UTIs. And
toxic shock
syndrome, which is wildly fatal. It's a very, very dangerous thing.
And it's fucking preventable.
And it's entirely preventable. That's the most frustrating part. And it also leads to people just not having the conversations they need to have when it comes to safe sex, whether they have had other partners, whether they've been tested, whether they've, you know, any of those things, what kind of birth control they're on, who's going to be the one holding that responsibility, et cetera, because all of that carries the same shame and stigma, and it makes people hesitant to discuss those topics, and those topics are vitally important.
I will just say that I don't think, for myself or any woman that I've ever had a conversation with this about, I've never known anybody who's had a conversation with their partner about whose job it was to be on anything. It's always just assumed that the woman is on birth control, and if she's not on birth control, she's going to get on birth control. Like, they might use a condom for the first couple of times, but then eventually they're just like, okay, like, you need to start popping that pill because, like, I need to feel your juicy juice all over my ding-a-ling. And those are medical terms.
And, like, that's another issue that comes up and that we can talk about, but this is a good segue into the other topic that is not discussed as much as it should be in sex ed classes when we're growing up, and that is the options for contraception. So, just like Talia said, a lot of times that falls on the girls. We are the ones being held responsible for all of that. Outside of having condoms. I feel like that's the only thing that tends to fall on dudes.
Well, because with women, there's so many options, right? Like, you know, oh crap, what is it called? The it's like 1950s, 1960s, like even before the pill was created. Like the dam, it's like a dental dam, but for your. I'm gonna be an adult.
We have these notes.
But
yes, so there's
what is that called?
Physical barriers. So you had
I cannot remember.
God.
Oh, it's a diaphragm. It's a fucking diaphragm, and I'm using my diaphragm. So you could use a diaphragm. It could be the birth control pill. Also now we have the arm implant, which I have, which honestly, I may do one more time, but one thing I was not told when I got on it was that it would stop my period. So I'll get it randomly. I can't properly track my cycle. I'll randomly get my period when I'm really, really stressed. Like my last breakup, I got it. I got it once again a few months ago when I was really stressed out at work.
It's fascinating to me that your period starts with stress.
My
and
period
I know
starts
other
with
people
stress.
That stress will stop
it starts with stress, or it's like a big emotional release. Because, like,
I mean, the woo-woo side of me thinks that makes total sense.
Yeah, it's like a total cleansing, right? Like, my vaginal wall needed to be rid of certain things. And so it was like, we're going to do a flush. Didn't help it happen on the full moon, too.
Finished my beverage, so we're refilling with water.
Refill with water. But also it's like, and then you have the, what's it called? The one that, like, pinches your uterus. I want to say UTI, and that's not what it fucking is called.
So,
why?
So there are hormonal contraceptives, like the Depo-Provera shot, the implant.
I forgot you could get a shot.
The pill, the NuvaRing. There are also intrauterine devices, IUDs.
Thank you.
Some of which are hormonal. Then there's also one that is not, that is made of copper, and the copper changes the pH of your uterus, which makes it hostile to sperm, and thus, prevents sperm from implanting in the egg, and then also from that sticking to your uterus wall, thus getting you pregnant.
You have like spermicide.
There are spermicides. And then you have barriers like the diaphragm or condoms, both male or female condoms.
I'm just putting up a finger for everyone that is intended to be taken or used by a woman.
And yeah, condoms is one of those because there are female condoms as well.
All right. Female condoms. We'll get to the male one later.
So that's a pretty good breakdown.
Fucking 8 that women can take, and what is the option
and that's not even getting into the variety of different types of pills.
Yeah.
And various types of hormone combinations.
And then men have condoms. That's 1 versus 8.
Or vasectomies.
I'm talking about ones that they're actually willing to do on a wide scale.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing, is all of these contraception practices
they can fuck you up.
Have a lot of different types of side effects, but also differing levels of efficacy. And a lot of people think, birth control pills are 99% effective, but that's only if you're taking them
at the same time every day.
Without fail. Ever. With realistic
you fuck up
use,
once, you could get pregnant.
With realistic use, average actual efficacy of birth control pills is closer to about 94%.
Yeah.
So there's a 6% chance that you could get pregnant even while on the pill.
Yeah. I was really bad at taking the pill, which is why I ended up getting the implant, because I wasn't taking it at the same time. I didn't know you had to take it at the same time. And then once I found out, the guy that I was with at the time, this poor man, I had so many panicked pregnancy scares that were definitely psychosomatic, where I would get so stressed out that I wouldn't get my period or I'd skip it. And I'd be like, oh my God, what if I'm pregnant? And I was super young, and I was just I'm on the verge of homelessness myself. I would have to get an abortion. I wouldn't be able to tell my parents. How would I get the money to do this? And then just taking him through that fucking emotional roller coaster ride with me, with him just being like, you're probably not. And then I would take a pregnancy test, and as soon as I took the pregnancy test and it would be negative, I would get my period the next day.
Yeah.
That happened 4 times.
Yeah. personal issues with birth control pills were varied for me. I've always had signs of hormonal imbalance. I think odds on that I had PCOS undiagnosed from a really young age.
Could you say what PCOS is for the people out there who don't know?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome. It is
painful as fuck.
Very painful, but it's essentially an imbalance in your hormones that causes one, cysts to form on your ovaries or your uterine.
It can feel akin to your appendix about to burst, if you wanted to know.
And yeah, the pain varies, but it also is known to be accompanied with like weird weight gain, excess body hair, all sorts of other symptoms that are associated with it. It could also very well have just been PMDD, which is a term for another hormonal thing where essentially you just have really extreme PMS symptoms.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can also eventually go into in further detail, or we will link more resources to those specific things in our description on YouTube, because it's good information to have. And
there's just so much that we just can't.
Yeah, like we could do hours of video on just the complications of periods. But all of that to say, we have a lot of options that are given to women, but with those come complications and risks, such as blood clots.
Yeah.
And, the more common ones that are just sort of shrugged off by the majority of society, such as like mood swings, weight gain, like headaches,
decrease in libido,
decrease in ability to orgasm, even if you do have libido still, all sorts of things.
It can also fuck with your fertility health down the road.
Years after you've gotten off of it.
Like you could be on the pill, and because you're not ready to be a parent yet, like, wonderful, mature decision, responsible, and then you could find the perfect person for you, or at least a person that you're like, I can see myself raising children with them, and then go to do the thing and
get off birth control and expect yourself to essentially immediately be capable of getting pregnant. And that is so not the case for the vast majority of people.
She may not be able to get pregnant anymore.
And it may be years of you having to work to fix the hormonal imbalances that long-term use of hormonal birth control causes or exacerbates, because if you already have them getting onto it, it will just ultimately make it worse. It can take years to fix that ultimately.
Yeah.
That last statement that I made also about it exacerbating it is another one of the facts about birth control that is not discussed. It is actually misrepresented wildly by doctors, more often than not, as a solution for hormonal imbalance.
Oh my gosh, my sister got put on birth control when she was like, I want to say 14 or 15, and not because she was sexually active, far from it, but because she had hormonal acne, and so they're like, oh, well, this is gonna just clear it up.
Yeah, a lot of
people get on it for that.
Even for me, with my weird, irregular bleeding cycles over the last few years, and like other signs of just definite dysregulation in my hormones, my reproductive hormones. The number of times I've had doctors just offhandedly be like, well, I mean, you could always just get back on birth control to regulate it. And I'm like, I'm pretty confident the fact that I was on it for 15 years already is a big part of why I'm having these issues now anyways.
Do your fucking job.
If you are someone who does no longer want to be on hormonal birth control, or who is interested in understanding the effects of hormonal birth control on your body and how to counter that, whether it's with the intention of rebalancing your hormones to get pregnant or just to achieve optimal health in your body, I cannot recommend the book Beyond the Pill enough. It is an incredible book. It's such a good book, in fact, that I once recommended it to a doctor or said that that's something that I was using to better understand my hormone imbalance symptoms. And he wrote it down, and my next appointment said that he was so impressed with it, he was recommending it to all of his colleagues.
What?
Yeah.
That makes me so fucking happy.
Yeah. That was when I was with Forward.
It's like,
which,
when you know better, you do
this
better.
is definitely not an ad for Forward. If they ever wanted to sponsor us, though, we'd be happy to have it, because Forward is an amazing doctor's office facility, and their whole system and approach to medicine is freaking amazing. Honestly, if I had the budget, I would still be going there. But yeah, like, hands down, the best resource I know for identifying what your probable hormone imbalances are, knowing exactly what tests you need to confirm that, so you can go in and advocate for yourself with your primary care physician or your OBGYN.
Because they won't test
depending
for
on your
unless
insurance.
You explicitly ask.
Exactly.
Which I never knew that, like, there wasn't just, same with, like, STI tests. Exactly. I thought that when you got tested, that they tested for everything. But turns out, you have to explicitly tell them which ones.
Yeah. And your standard panels for your annual physical that are supposed to get done will not catch the majority of hormone imbalances.
Yeah.
It takes more specific testing to actually find those causes. And it's not something that most doctors are taught also, which is part of why it's such an issue in our medical system. So,
I think that just a lot of times it's just like, and it's really confusing to me, considering that doctors, and obviously, like, there's different specialties, and I know that you can't obviously learn everything that there is to know about medicine and the human body just through, I mean, it's like 8 years of school, but still, there's so much to know, and it's constantly evolving. But I feel like, in general, and maybe this, and I can't speak for the entire world, I can just speak for what I know from living in the United States and from having healthcare here, is that it's kind of written off as, like, not so much that it's a woman's problem, but just, like, that whole thing is just so complex and mysterious that, like, it could just be totally normal. It just, you got pain? Probably your period. You're feeling, like, wildly depressed and, like, you should jump in front of a train? Probably just PMS. Like,
yeah,
you'll be fine.
Or you might just need to lose weight. Like, that's going to magically fix everything. So yeah, that is female birth control options. There are currently 2 actually effective male birth control options available in the U.S. marketplace, like, and in the West, being condoms and vasectomies.
Even though there is a male birth control pill that they just refuse to pump out because, heaven forbid, that men have mood swings or weight gain or libido issues.
So that is one of the things that I did actually look up. So there's actually currently about 8 different options of male birth control that are in the chute, that are, like, in development.
Makes me want to fucking break something. I need a rage room. I need a rage room right now.
Male birth control pills. Now, one of the difficulties with male birth control when it comes to that is testosterone can be used as a male contraception.
Interesting.
At the right dosages and the right type, it can stop sperm production. But you cannot take it in pill form. It is toxic to take in pill form.
Would it have to
be has to be injected. There is an alternative medication that they are working on that is a different chemical that achieves similar results in the body, that they're working on for a pill form as well. One of the most promising, and one that has been doing very well, last I checked, in South and Southeast Asia, is the method of injecting a chemical into the vas deferens, which is essentially the tube that goes from the testes out of the penis. It's the tube that moves the sperm out during ejaculation. And so,
escape chute.
Essentially, there's 2. There's Vasogel, and I think the other one is
Was it something that was written
it's
down?
Probably written down if you want to look that up.
We've just been bouncing around so much. I love that I said that this is going to be like 10 things that you wish you had learned in sex ed, but knowing us, we can't
actually do that in an organized
those things.
fashion.
That's not
sorry,
how our
guys.
brains work. We're so sorry. Like, our bad.
I just went condoms, etc. No, there we go. Okay. I'll put a link to it below, but it's like Rizgel or something. I don't know. It's another Rizvi. It starts with a R-I-S. I don't remember the last 2 or 3 letters of the word. But Vasogel is essentially the same concept, different chemical compound. But they inject a chemical compound, a solution, into the vas deferens, and it kills or fully just disrupts the sperm from being able to leave the body.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And
so it doesn't even like paralyze them so they can't swim. Like they literally are
just like
staying.
There's
home,
no sperm coming out.
You're grounded.
The rest of the ejaculate comes out, but there's no sperm in it. Cool. And then when you decide you would like to have babies, there is a solution to flush that chemical out of the vas deferens.
Dude, that's so cool.
And it's an outpatient procedure. It's literally, like they numb the area a little bit and they do a little shot into your vas deferens on both sides, and you're good to go. It has been doing really well in the areas where it's in human trials and like where it's being used currently. It's just not available in the US yet because of fucking big pharma politics and old white dudes running things, obviously.
Not the old white man. Logan Schmidt. What? A white man?
Because, like...
That is who runs everything, like...
Yeah.
Why tiptoe around the subject? It's just true.
So those are the options. There is also, some people would like to say, like the pull-out method, but that is so wildly ineffective, it does not fucking count.
So my mom, so in the Catholic Church, you have to, like, I don't remember what it's exactly called, but you have to have meetings with a priest before you can get married, right?
Yeah.
So my mom's Catholic, and so before my mom and my dad got married, they had to have these meetings with this priest. And apparently this priest was a really chill guy because they were talking about different forms of contraception, and the Catholic Church does not believe in contraception. They don't believe in birth control. They don't believe in the use of condoms.
No.
They don't believe in any of that. Why? Because they're insane.
Because they haven't evolved past the ancient need to procreate, to keep, your family going so that you could keep supporting
back
your,
when
like
half of your children would die because of smallpox. So you're like, I'm gonna have 16 and a spare just in case the plague hits. But anyways, but this priest was really chill, and he talked to them about the pull-out method as being something that was Vatican sanctioned, but he called it Vatican roulette. And I fucking love him for that.
That's my new name for it.
Yeah, it's Vatican roulette because
that's amazing.
And especially because I think that's do we want to talk any more about vasectomies before I make this segue?
Yes. So vasectomies,
put a pause on that.
I do want to talk about because this is something that's not really talked about.
And then we'll take a small break so that we can refill. And then we'll come back to you.
So, just to touch on it, vasectomies are very effective. It is one of the most effective methods.
You know your notes better than me. I'm so sorry.
I do. It's okay.
I wanted to feel like I was contributing.
Out of the male contraception options, vasectomies have a 0.15% failure rate.
I'm so sorry. Could you say that one more time?
0.15%. Making them the most effective method, other than permanent sterilization for women. That is minuscule compared to the pill, which has a 9% failure rate. Sorry, not 6%, 9% failure rate. So it's only 91% effective, the pill. Condoms, which have an 18% failure rate. And the withdrawal method, which has a 22% failure rate of preventing pregnancies.
I'm rethinking a lot of my choices. I'm so lucky.
The thing with vasectomies is they are mostly reversible. They are not always.
Okay, that's good to know, because I thought that they were always reversible, but that is not the case.
So the actual success rate of reversing a vasectomy depends on how many years have passed since you got it.
Okay.
Okay. But even then, the success rates are 60 to 95% for return of sperm in your ejaculate.
60 to 95%. You know, honestly, knowing that, if I was a man
and you wanted to one day have
kids, I would think twice about getting a vasectomy.
Yeah.
Just because, and it's the same with being on birth control. Like, it would be so freaking heartbreaking to be putting that off because you're being responsible, and then finally wanting to, and then not being able to. And like, obviously, yes, you can always adopt and things like that, but it also depends on your partner and their wants. And
so the key points to keep in mind, though, are that pregnancy is possible more than 50% of the time after reversal, and like as much as 95% of the time after reversal. The success rates start to decline after you've had it for 15 years.
What?
Yeah. So
that gets you, like,
if you're thinking short term, like even a decade.
18, do math for me, Chloe. 18 plus 15 is?
18 plus 15 would be 33.
I mathed before you did. Well, we mathed at the same time, but I got there. I feel like that's like most of the time when a lot of guys are like, oh my God, I've got to
nowadays
settle down.
Fairly
but now it's more
chill.
Like 40.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So if you want to have them young, it's not a terrible option.
No.
There can be complications, but, you know, keep in mind also that adoption is always a viable option.
Yeah.
There's so many children without homes. That's always been my preferred method of having kids, should I decide to have them.
I don't know.
Ever since I was literally a child. But that's a conversation for another time, probably.
I feel there's a weird part of me, like, if I wasn't able to have children, like, I love kids. I love kids so much. I'm wonderful with them. I think that they are literally, besides animals, are the purest thing on this planet. And I think a lot of people don't deserve them. Just because of what they're going to put into their little tiny sponge minds. Mm-hmm. But I've always wanted to have a natural birth, just because in a weird psychotic masochistic way I'm getting to have this science experiment in my body. You just squirt in a little bit of this and boom.
Yeah.
But then there's other reasons why I'm like, maybe not.
Yeah. I think the conversations around reasons why people may or may not want to have children,
they're all individual,
vast and very individual,
and all of them are valid.
And all of them are valid.
Do what's best for you. No one gets the right to say what's right or wrong.
Gets to decide that for you,
as long as you're not kidnapping babies.
So yeah, that is the facts on vasectomies and male birth control options. I do want to just close that section out by saying part of why we're so emphatic when we're discussing the absurdity of the majority of responsibility for birth control falling on women's shoulders lies deeply in the fact that literally the only way a woman can get pregnant is with a man's sperm.
And also, it's one of those things, like, if we do get pregnant, I feel like it's a damned if we do, damned if we don't situation, because you're seen as a monster if you get an abortion. And, like, yes, it is technically the other person's child, too, but if you don't want to be having a child and having it rip itself out of you like an alien, then, sorry, like, I have to make light of this. My humor comes from my trauma, and my humor protects me from my brain. and from pain. But if you don't want to do that, and
for whatever reason,
and your partner does, and you choose to get an abortion, like, you're seen as, I think, by most people, like a villain, because, like, oh, how selfish could you be, like, to be making this choice for yourself and your body. And then if you choose to have a baby, and you're not,
many risks.
Well, one, there's so many risks, but also just, like, if you're young, if you are financially unstable, if you are in an unstable relationship, or I'm just going to leave it at unstable relationship, because that is a cacophony of things. Not cacophony, spectrum, whatever.
Sometimes it's a cacophony.
You're also thank you for validating me in my interesting speech pattern sometimes. But you're seen as a monster for bringing a life onto this planet when you can't properly care for it, like, and it's just,
that can easily segue into the politics of reproductive health,
which
and that is going to be its own video.
That's going to be its own video. We're not going to do that today,
yeah,
because I don't have enough wine in this house to get through that conversation.
Yeah, no, that's not something we're going to discuss today, because this is about sex ed.
So sex ed. Okay,
so talking about, we've covered birth control thoroughly at this point.
Yeah, that's done for now.
One thing that we did not really get into in terms of menstrual and reproductive hygiene is
the different forms of blood
products,
stoppers,
sanitary products that one can use.
Yeah.
So most sex ed classes are going to basically offer you pads and tampons, especially historically. That's like the main go-tos. Especially for like the younger ages, when they're talking to you about it, more often than not, they're going to default to just wanting to give you pads.
Because a lot of people still think that using a tampon takes your fucking virginity.
Yeah.
But we're going to rant about that later, because I have not the rage. Well, I have the rage, but I don't have the time to release that rage, so we're going to come back to that. So.
Yeah. We'll do a whole episode, I'm sure, at some point.
Whole episode.
The myths of virginity.
Oh, no, I actually do have one. It's called Loose, the fetishization of virginity. I have, like, a whole list of possible episodes. When they come out, we don't know until we get all hot and bothered by one of them.
Yeah.
So with pads,
there are pads that can be, as small and thin as a classic panty liner, which is great if you are in your ovulation cycle,
or if you're towards like the end
part of your cycle,
a really lighter flow, or it's like winding down.
Yeah, and I do say, like, for the ovulation part of your cycle, because typically you are going to have more cervical mucus produced at that point.
The good stuff. The good.
And that reminds me of the other thing that we didn't talk on in terms of birth control, but we'll circle back to that really quickly. Tampons offer you more versatility in terms of what you can do activity-wise. Like, you can still swim, etc.,
commercials from like the early 2000s.
Exactly.
Oh, those are seared into my fucking brain.
The thing about tampons, though, that I don't love, and that can be scary for a lot of people, is the risk of toxic shock syndrome.
It's high.
Is pretty high. You can't keep your tampon in more than like 8 hours max.
Yeah.
Which, considering especially at younger ages, ideally you're sleeping like 9 hours, is a problem.
Yeah, because you have to get them out and then you change it out.
And if you have a lighter flow, even the light flow tampons can be extremely uncomfortable to use.
Yeah, well, even like I remember,
or just outright painful and like stick to you.
Towards the end of my period, it would get really light, and so a lot of tampon boxes have, well, it's ones that my mom would get me, would be, you have like thicker tampons for a heavier flow, and you have like the medium ones, and you have the light ones. And a lot of times this would happen to me, what I'm about to explain would happen like during school hours, when like I was having to take regular bathroom breaks just to make sure that I didn't have to get up in the next class and have them possibly tell me no. and then say like in the middle of the class being like, well, I've got my period.
Yeah.
And yeah. Or it would happen when I was sleeping, but towards the end of my period, it would get really light, and it is so painful taking out a relatively dry tampon. It's like sandpaper scraping down the sides of your vaginal walls. And it fucking sucks, Chloe.
Oh, I know.
I know that you know, but like, dear Gaia. But I don't like using them anymore for that reason, just because it came enough of an issue where, and also if you're still bleeding, it hurts on the way out, and then you have to put another one in, so you're rubbing up against like, it's
so
not fun.
Tampons not great, a little out of date.
If you have to use them,
also,
do it, but like, just be aware.
Something to keep in mind, especially as, you know, we are hopefully as a collective society, and especially people our age and younger, are very aware of this. The ecological impact of disposable sanitary products is insane. The average number that a woman will use in her lifetime is 15,000.
Between 12,000 and 15,000 pads, tampons, and panty liners, as per Rochester Institute of Technology report.
Yes. Thank you for reading the citation on that.
I felt like it was needed.
So, think about what that means in terms of monthly and annual cost, because those things are not cheap. The pink tax is real, guys. And then also, there's fucking sales tax on the sanitary products.
I know.
But also just the amount of waste. Not to even mention the health risks associated with it.
We know better now, we need to do better, period.
So the alternative, and the one that we wish we had learned about when we were first getting our periods, and that we want to make sure everyone knows.
When we were first getting our periods?
They were just not widely known or
that legitimately makes me pissed off, because I did not know that there was another option until Chloe was the first person when we first lived together and I was in college. She was the first person to introduce me to menstrual cups. Yep. And they changed my fucking life.
So menstrual cups and menstrual discs. Yeah. They work the same way.
I've never used a disc, but I've used like a deeper cup.
Historically, menstrual discs have always been a disposable option, but the same concept essentially is that it is a small silicone or like rubberized disc or
I can't even grab mine right now from the hall. I still have mine.
Yeah, I have mine in the medicine cabinet. And it just folds up and inserts inside you and then fits there. And instead of absorbing the menstrual blood, it holds it. It just captures it. And what that means is that there is virtually zero risk of toxic shock syndrome or other infection from your menstrual products.
And you were saying that it lasts for what, 10 years? A menstrual cup is good for 10 years.
A reusable menstrual cup. There are also reusable menstrual discs now. Those can be cared for and sanitized regularly. You can soak them in hydrogen peroxide for up to 24 hours, which will remove the stains and will completely sanitize them. A lot of them you can also just like wash it off with soap and water and then run it through your dishwasher to sanitize it.
Don't use anything with alcohol on it though, because alcohol breaks down silicone.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
You know, but they are cleaner, they're better for your body, and it's a one-time purchase, potentially every 10 years.
Mine's lasted me, I think I've had it for 4 years now. It seems really expensive right off the bat, because I think they're like $30, $35.
They vary in price. There's some as little, I think now is like $18.
That's amazing.
There are also disposable options in the form of menstrual discs. Flex, I believe, is one of them. We'll put links to more information on this in our description.
All the links.
One thing that is also really great about these, less so with the menstrual cups, though I've also, done it and been okay, but with menstrual discs, you can actually have sex with it still in. it fits in you so similarly to the way a diaphragm, one of those physical barrier contraception devices that we talked about, that essentially you can just leave it up in there and have sex, and your partner won't be able to feel it. With a cup, they'll be able to feel it. That's part of why you don't want to do that.
Because it's cone shaped, there's a little like thing at the end, so they will be hitting that.
And it can shove it further up in you. That's why you don't want to have sex with a menstrual cup in you. I have. It's doable. It's just not ideal. Lady. Sorry if my parents are watching this, but you know, things you didn't need to know, but you know.
If you're watching this, you're going to hear a lot of things you didn't want to know. So if that's the case, then you need to log
on. We appreciate the support.
We appreciate your support. We appreciate your love, but we're grown adults, so that's a thing.
But with a menstrual disc, you can have completely safe sex on your period, and even better, sex on your period can improve your PMS symptoms, like your cramps. It can drastically reduce.
Orgasms are natural mood boosters or natural painkillers.
It boosts your immune system. It's really an amazing thing for women in general.
An orgasm a day, I don't know.
Could keep the doctor away
if
you're doing it safely.
Yeah.
So, yes. Period sex for the win. We highly recommend. We get that people have stigmas about it and feel weird about it, but you know,
we'll have a different episode about like periods and like the stigma, the complete stigma around them, how they're seen as like unclean.
It's actually really healthy
to
have sex on it, and there's a reason why. It's part of why a lot of women also experience higher sex drive during their period, because it actually helps your body feel better. I do find it interesting that, you know, for men, after they orgasm and ejaculate, it is actually energetically depleting for them a lot of times.
Because we feel rejuvenated.
Whereas for us, it actually, it boosts our immune system. We feel rejuvenated. It helps our, like, everything. All our hormones are happier.
You get that glow. You look
so
sexy.
Those were just a couple more facts that we wanted to touch on for this episode. I think that about covers it.
I think that about covers everything that we need to get to in this episode. And then everything else that's going to be a little bit less
more specific to like sex health.
Yeah, more to like
the sex part of
the
sex
act
ed
itself.
And like safety and all of that.
Destigmatizing, all that good stuff.
We'll go into in part 2, because that is part of what sex ed covered.
Yeah.
And you know, we'll go into more details on that was the other detail I do remember now. So the last contraception method that we wanted to talk about, and I can maybe edit this so that it flows better and I can insert it earlier in the episode. But outside of the hormonal and the barrier versions, there is also the like family planning or tracking methods.
Yes.
These have varying levels of efficacy on their own, but there is one term that refers to combining all three of them in one that has actually a higher efficacy rate than the birth control pill, because it is 96% effective when you do all three in conjunction. And those three are your basal temperature, monitoring your basal temperature, which is basically your temperature when you first wake up every single day. Because in the I should have looked up the specific phases of your menstrual cycle, but
you can also go through that lately, and then in the next one, just especially because we're going to go over like ovulation and whatnot. So like, we're going to do as part 2, and we're going to start with the basal temperature, the tracking,
etc.
The
tracking your cervical mucus is the term. I know that that's a weird term. There's probably icky feelings about the term mucus, but that is what it is.
Princess of the Frog.
You know, it's not slime.
It's mucus.
So yeah, tracking your cervical mucus, the texture, the consistency of it, the discharge that you're putting out. because discharge is totally normal.
It happens every day
varies.
to everybody.
Yeah, and it's going to change over the course of your cycle.
Oh God,
and that is entirely normal. That's actually part of how you can tell what part of your cycle you're at.
I know that my period is coming. I don't know if this is normal, but like I know my period is coming when like I feel I get like a lot of mucus. And then I go completely dry for like 2 or 3 days, and then I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And when I get that feeling of what the fuck is going on, then the little voice inside my head goes like, it's Shark Week time, bitches.
So if you weren't on hormonal birth control, what that would signify...
But I am on hormonal birth control, so who knows?
That creates like weird false periods, essentially.
Gross.
Because you aren't losing an egg, so it's not even a real period.
No egg.
But when you are ovulating, you're going to have a different consistency of
that's when it gets good.
Mucus. It's more like an egg white consistency.
Yeah.
Essentially natural lubrication, because your body wants you to get pregnant.
I would also people are gonna get so mad at me for saying this, but like there is somebody out there, and I'm thinking specifically of him when I say this. He may or may not have used to work with me. If he's never gonna see this, but if I know people out there who are watching this who do know him, it's even period blood is what he would call natural lubrication. Because he's a twisted little dirty birdie, and I love him.
I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
So, tracking those two things, basal temperature, cervical mucus, and then also the position of your cervix in your body.
Which I didn't even know that your cervix could be positioned differently until I think I was watching a show or something. I was like 20,
and that does
21.
change over the course of your cycle. So when you're more fertile, your cervix actually lowers as you're approaching ovulation.
It's like preparing itself.
It also changes in hardness and like texture. Like your cervix actually changes.
It's alive!
Depending on what part of your cycle you're in. So if you're and there are ways to check that. So if you're tracking the position of your cervix, the cervical mucus, and your basal temperature, there's also a saliva test that will tell you how fertile you are, because of how the crystals form in your saliva as it dries.
But you need a microscope for this?
Like a magnifying glass. There's kits that allow you to test it. So you like put your spit on like a lens, and then you look at it as it dries, and if it looks fern-like, that is an indication that you are approaching your ovulation. You're within 2 or 3 days of ovulation.
The human body is a wonderful and magical place.
And so if you're doing all of those things, then you know what those 6 days that you are most likely to get pregnant are, and what the rest of the cycle is where you are relatively safe.
So you already kind of said it, and it was on the list, but like you can only get pregnant during 6 days of the month. Just nobody tracks their basal temperature. Nobody tracks their mucus.
It's that very few people are actually doing that consistently. Very few people do this,
and so it's why we have this myth that you can get pregnant at any time, and why there's such fear about this, which we will go more into in part 2 because I have more to say. But we need to like wrap it up.
But yes, you can only get really
when you're ovulating,
except for like weird flukes of nature,
the Virgin Mary.
But essentially, for the 5 days leading up to your ovulation and the day of your ovulation, those are the only days that you can get pregnant, based on the fact that, one, your egg is only going to stay viable and alive in your body for 12 to 24 hours after it releases.
Yeah,
from
and male
your
sperm
ovary.
can only stay alive in your body for 5 days, which is why sometimes having sex on your period, especially towards the end of your period, depending on your cycle, is not
depending
the
on
best.
the length of your cycle. Yeah,
it's
not a
best.
guarantee.
It's not a guarantee, but it is a good bet that like you just your body is literally purging. It's throwing a temper tantrum that you're not pregnant. It's like, get out of my house, be gone, and then it's going to set up shop again in the hopes of, a gentleman caller.
So with those 3 factors, if you add the spit, that's a 4th factor. But if you're tracking all those different things, then you'll have a clear idea and be able to actually know very accurately, actually, that you are approaching that window of ovulation So you know that you need to be using a secondary birth control method,
and
like
it also
a
can
barrier.
help you get pregnant if you want to get pregnant. I had a friend do that when she got married.
Alternatively, also learning to track these things from the get-go.
We should just be taught this.
It should just be incredibly helpful, because it will also help you know very early on if you have hormonal imbalances you should be concerned about. And also if something starts to randomly change in your cycle and in your body that has nothing to do with you getting pregnant. Like if you aren't sexually active but you start like missing periods and having like weird symptoms like fluctuations in your cycle length, etc. That can bring up the fact that like, oh, I might need to get something checked, because that could be a sign of like HPV or cervical cancer or hormonal imbalances and things like that. And so you want to be able to identify those as early as possible so that you can then take steps to correct that. So there's myriad benefits to tracking your period and to learning to identify what stage of your hormonal cycle you're at by reading the signs that your body is giving you.
Yeah. Your body is like, the one thing that really gets to me is like, yes, like honestly, like I come from the viewpoint, like I think you, I know that you do too. I don't really see much of a difference between science and magic. Magic is just
spicy science
hasn't figured out yet, or and it's happening every day. That's amazing.
Science.
And I think that people need to start, both men and women, we need to start looking at these things that our body does. Like the time for like the freaking dark ages mentality of it's gross or it's dirty or it's bad just needs to die out. Not just because it's sad, but just also because it's extremely dangerous and it leads to a lot of really horrible things happening. And I think that the more that you can realize that you're not alone, that these are things that happen to everyone, the better off we're gonna be, honestly. Like,
we want all of us to have healthy bodies and healthy sex lives. And also, and this is something that I had written down but didn't necessarily come up, do keep in mind all of these things affect all of us, regardless of whether we are assigned female at birth and stay female our whole lives, or whether we discover as we're growing, or even as young children, that we are trans, or if you are intersex. Like, there's so many different ways that all of this information is relevant to all of us. And if all of us have this knowledge and all of us understand the realities of what reproductive health actually is and looks like and what it means, one, we can recognize that maybe our reproductive hormones are out of balance and that's why we can't fucking sleep, and why our face is so dry all the time, and why like we're losing our hair. Or we can also understand why like things don't feel right in our body, any number of things. And even if you don't ever want to have sex, even if you are asexual, it's still solid information to have, precisely because it affects so many other aspects of your overall physical health. So that's
There's
episode
no bad
1.
That's gonna come from it. That's
it's
episode
part
1.
of why we are so passionate about this. We will be going further into the actual like reproduction cycle in part 2, and like safe sex.
We're going to talk about normalizing and removing the stigma from, one, your physical bodies, but also from self-pleasure, which I know I know we're both going to go on a huge rant about. So next episode, honestly, every episode is going to be like this. We're going to go in with a frickin' plan, and it's going to go to hell in a beautiful handbag. And I mean, it's not.
And hopefully, you know, if you're our people, you're gonna enjoy that and you're gonna be along for the ride.
We said in the first episode, like, we know that there's people out there who are watching this because they love us and they want to support us, and we love you guys so much. But we also know that, like, we're both two really, I don't want to use the word quirky, but we are. We're quirky little turkeys, and
quirky turkeys.
I totally stole that from Bob's Burgers. I'm sorry. My mind only speaks in movie and film quotes.
It's okay. Most of my mannerisms are straight copies of my favorite characters.
But people are gonna find us, and certain things are gonna resonate. We're not gonna be everyone's cup of tea, pun intended. So,
but we are hoping that we're enough people's cup of tea that we can get good information out there for people, and that also our quirkiness and our honesty and the realness with which we approach these subjects and the casualness with which we can actually actively, obviously discuss these things without discomfort or squeamishness or weirdness will help others to do the same.
Yeah.
Because that's the goal.
Even if you watch this and then you go into like a talk, like my dream, and this may never happen, but maybe someday someone will find this in the old dusty archives of YouTube after AI has taken over and killed us all. But maybe there'll be like one lone teenage girl out there whose parents will find this, and they'll be like, maybe, like, probably don't show it to her just because, I mean, or do, depending on your parenting style, but you can take information from this and talk to your kids about it. Like, if you don't know where to start, I hope that somebody out there learned something from this, even if it was just me admitting to us being quirky little turkeys.
Just to close out this episode, because it's fun, I also want to include the fact that, like, as much shame and weirdness as we have around periods and talking about them, one of the funnier and more entertaining things that has come out of that is the fact that globally there is over 5,000 known euphemisms
5,000
to refer to periods. Two of my favorites that I found
you're better at French.
are the French one, Les Anglais ont débarqué, the English have landed,
which is hilarious,
delightfully hilarious. And then I did not even write down the German word because I knew I would butcher it, but essentially it's Strawberry Week.
Yeah, and my favorite is Shark Week, just because.
Yeah.
It tickles
Aunt
me.
Flo.
Yeah. I can't think of a lot of.
There's a lot of
Maybe we'll like make a small TikTok and we'll like make a list.
Yeah, we'll look up some of our favorites.
I'm assuming one of them somewhere must be like, if Communist Week is not in that list, then humanity has failed.
There's the biscuits behind you looking very serious. It's really great. This is our little
the
biscuits.
real star.
She's adorable.
We got biscuits, and then we have Bowie loafing over there. He was chilling on a box by our feet.
So
I think that's it. We need to sign off.
Episode 1. We're gonna thank you so much for joining us for episode 2.
We love you guys.
Our first official full episode with facts and not just introductions,
and not just us blabbering about ourselves.
And stay tuned for episode 3.
SexEd Part 2
of SexEd coming next week.
Yeah, that will be out next week.
Yeah.
And next week is the week after, whenever we fucking post this.
Yes, which should be this Friday.
Boop. Bye.
Cheers.
Go away. Do something with your lives. Go masturbate and be happy.